Namaste everyone. On the stage, respected Madan Gopalji, who is the chair of the session, my co-panelist, Srimati Mamta Yadavji, respected Santoshji, Anirbanji, Asim Arunji, my colleagues from Yuva Morcha, and all the respected audience. Today we have gathered here to discuss a very important topic and very important aspect of this two-day-long seminar, that is the role of youth in the vision, in the framework of the integral humanism or Ekatma Manav Darshan. Now, Ekatma Manav Darshan may sound like a very philosophical, abstract concept. And trust me, it is not my intention to get into philosophies and metaphysics of the concept, because I'm not a philosopher, I'm an economist by training. So I will structure my speech in three parts. Number one, I will speak and give a broad overview of the historical context. Because when we talk about the role of the youth and the role of the people, especially the youngsters who are below 25, it is important to understand what is the Desh Kal. Because everything that we talk about, this is a responsibility or this is a duty of the person. It is dependent on the Desh Kala. The second aspect will be the blueprint provided by Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay ji and his integral humanism to address these issues and these challenges before the youth. In the last part, I will try to touch upon, in a very brief manner, how the policies of our government, especially in the Prime Minister, Shri Narendra Modi ji, is following this vision and this blueprint provided by Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay ji. So when we talk about the historical context, because when we say when India is the youngest country in the world, with more than 65% population below the age of 35, and when we say what is the power, potential, and purpose of this generation, it has to be located in the millennia-old journey of Indian civilization. And it's a harsh fact that last 1,000 years have not been very beneficial, very conducive to our culture, our civilization. We have suffered repeated invasions. We have suffered foreign rule, foreign domination in various forms over the last couple of centuries. Whether it was the military occupation of the North India by the Turkish tribes, that is Delhi Sultanate, or the settler colonialism of the Mughals, or the direct modern colonialism of the British Empire. India was invaded, India was plundered, India was devastated to an extent beyond imagination. I will give you one just brief example as to why this is very important. We know that British conquered Bengal in the Battle of Plassey in the year 1757. Bengal was one of the richest provinces of the world, not just India or Asia. And within 10 years, Bengal suffers a famine in 1770s, in which almost 1/3 of Bengal population dies of hunger and starvation. This is the extent of the plunder and the devastation which was caused by the British rule. And I'm not even talking about the previous colonial powers, whether they were Mughals or the Turks. And what followed was 2 centuries of hunger and destruction. 200 years of British rule in India is the history of famines and hunger and mass starvation. Every 10 years, you will have a massive famine in one part or the other of the country, in which death tolls would be 5 million, 6 million, 10 million, 11 million. And every 10 years, I just want to add, there was an armed rebellion against the British, which is often not talked about. So when we talk about the role of the youth today, we have to realize that though we have survived as a civilization, as a nation, India, to borrow from Naipaul, is a wounded civilization. So the task of our generation, the youth, who constitute 65% of India's population, is national rejuvenation and civilizational renaissance. Now, it may sound abstract once again, so I would like to list 4 points which are part of this project. When we talk about national rejuvenation or civilizational renaissance, it has 4 components in my opinion. Number one, to ensure the sovereignty and the territorial integrity of the Bharatvarsha. Because if history teaches us anything, and when I was in JNU, I was in the economics department at JNU, which was the high citadel of the left of India. So we had this paper called Economic History. And many of the students would not like to study economic history. They say, "Iska fayda kya hai? This is a useless paper." So our professor, I mean, she was, even though she was on the left, but she was more rational, I would say. So she said that economic history is important because economic history is applied macroeconomics. And the students of economics who know only mathematical formulas, differential equations, mathematical modeling, stats, they're semi-literate economists because they do not benefit from the hindsight and the collective wisdom of the centuries. So one of the collective wisdom of the centuries which tells us that India's boundaries over millennia have always been contested, and we cannot take the territorial integrity of India or the sovereignty of this nation for granted. It has to be a continuous endeavor to make sure that India is strong enough, to make sure India can defend its people, to make sure that Indian state is strengthened in the coming century as well. Because after centuries, Indians have a state, and this is an aspect which is often, neglected or underplayed. The second aspect is to ensure mass prosperity. Because if anything has happened in the last 200 years, it was the mass deprivation of the people to such an extent that people of our country have actually suffered from biological disabilities as well. When we travel across countries, and there are many people who go and say, "I look at the people, they're so short and they're not looking good, they're ugly." This is the word people use. And I often remind them, this is what we're seeing is the result of multi-generational poverty, multi-generational protein deficiency, multi-generational impact of the food scarcity. So creation of mass prosperity is the second core component of this purpose of the youth that we are talking about. The third has to be revitalization of the cultural consciousness. In many sessions we have talked about languages, cultures, and that constitute a very important aspect of the purpose of the youth. And the fourth has to be ensuring the social egalitarianism, because that has always been an issue in every part of the world, but in India that continues to be an issue, so that has to be the fourth component of this purpose of the youth, that is national rejuvenation and civilizational renaissance. Now coming to Pandit Deendayal Upadhyay's vision of integral humanism, and I will say that it is a bit more complex philosophy. Many people I have been talking to since yesterday, they are saying we are not able to grasp the exact essence of the integral humanism of Ekat Manav Darshan. So I have tried to sum it up in few points as to what I have understood by this philosophy. The first point, the first core of the integral humanism of Ekat Manav Darshan is that sum total of things, or summation, is greater than the different and greater than and different from its parts and components. Take, for example, this mic that I'm using. It constitutes of several components, from chip to wire to plastics and other things. All of those components have their own characteristics, their own unique personality, their own unique existence. When they combine together to create this mic is something different. And this is a very important point that Pandit ji made, because whether you talk about the capitalism or the socialism, which were the dominant ideology of the time in which he was talking about, both of them actually based their worldview or structure on something called methodological individualism. That individuals are the unit, and society is simply the sum total of the individuals. What is true for individual is also true for the society. Ekat Manav Darshan says that is not true, even though the society constitutes of individuals who are sovereign, who have their individual personality, individual ambitions, individual abilities. But when they combine together to create a society, that society is an organic entity in its own. It has its own personality, its own characteristics, its own atma or soul or chiti. The second point the philosophy says is that we have to look at the human being in an integral, we have to take an integral view of the human beings. Humans are not just about pursuit, if I can borrow the traditional Indian words, artha and kama. There has to be arth, kam, dharma, and moksha as well. So Panditji says in the terms of body, mind, intellect, and soul, that we have to look at the humans as constituting body, mind, intellect, and soul. And we're talking about the individual development or the youth development. it has to cater to all the requirements, all the essentials that are required for developing you know, a youngster for which can carry the civilization journey of Bharat. Individual freedom, social duty, and national vision is another aspect which comes out of this philosophy. What also comes about is the role of the culture, that India is a civilization and we have to be very cognizant of the culture because culture animates small things that we do. To give you an example how this is very important, and often we have debates in India about, let's say, the privacy law in the internet is. So we see many campaigns and many committees and many people writing that in India the privacy laws are very weak and the best privacy laws are in the Scandinavian countries, right? And we should adopt their model of the Scandinavian countries because they have created the best privacy law which is suited for the digital age. But the problem is that the value that we place on privacy in India, in our culture, and in the Scandinavian countries is completely different because social trajectory has been completely different. In the Scandinavian countries, I mean, you must have seen all those Viking series and other things, they had a huge problem of interpersonal violence. They were extremely violent societies. So their social evolution over the last 1,000 years, when they converted to the Protestant Christianity and before that, different forms of Christianity, it was consciously created a social culture that people should stay away from each other. That the interaction between the people should reduce because it often led to very massive interpersonal group violence. So how they have evolved over the centuries, how their culture values privacy, and how Indian culture values privacy, I mean, if I can say it on a lighter note, paros mein kya chal raha, sabko hi pata hota hai. So why should we follow their rules and regulation and adopt it blindly in India? The Panditji would say that this blindness comes from neglect of the culture and understanding of the culture in the role of shaping the institutions, rules and regulations and laws of the country. The other point is decentralization of power and Atmanirbharta in the economic models. Other point is Antyodaya. All of you are well aware of Antyodaya. I need not elaborate upon it. And the last point which this philosophy talks about is the harmony with the nature. That Prakriti sahyatri hai. Prakriti is not a place to exploit. It's not a warehouse of resources where you can take whatever you want without the thinking of the sustainability. So basically, to sum up Ekatma Manav Darshan and his philosophy, we can say for the youth it is grow fast, but stay rooted, share the gains, and protect the planet. Panditji also talked about, in his vision, looking at the society as the Virat Purusha, or what he calls as Virat. This analogy he has taken from our ancient religious traditions, the Vedic traditions of Virat Purusha. And he says that, as I've talked about, the society has a personality of its own. It's an organic entity, which he calls at Virat, and that consists of three components. First is the Vyakti, or the individual, which you can think of as being individual cells in the body. The other one, the second component is the Virat, that is the collective body itself, which is institutions, economic structures, political structures, and Chiti, which animates it, the national soul, which animates the entire body. And Ekatma Manav Darshan says that if there is an issue in either three of them, the country cannot grow, the nation cannot grow. Basically, युवा तभी तक शक्तिशाली है जब उसकी चेतना राष्ट्र की चिति से जुड़कर शक्ति में बदलती है. So if there is a suppression of the national soul or national consciousness, we will have the rootless model, the model that we have seen after independence in India under Nehru and different kind of socialist ideologies. And if the youth or the individual cells are diseased for some reason, maybe because of the wokeism or moral confusion, or nowadays because of different kinds of physical, the drug abuse and other kind of a thing, then also this Virat will suffer, this national body will suffer. So Upadhyay's Ekatma Manav Darshan is not an abstract concept itself. If you read about it, it has very substantial points which is the philosophy is making, and which are very relevant for the youth because it gives you the blueprint for the youth as to how you can deal with the problems and challenges. Now take, for example, I mean, lots of people talk about how is it relevant today, and how we can use the Ekatma Manav Darshan to look at the challenges for the youth. we have seen the purpose for the youth, that the purpose of the youth is to make sure that the national regeneration or the civilizational renaissance. But take, for example, let's say the challenge of artificial intelligence. Now, you would say that how Ekatmano Darshan can give any idea or any suggestions for dealing with the challenges of artificial intelligence. Now, if we look at three concepts, Chiti, Virat, and Vyakti. The Chiti is basically the values, the Atman, right? The ethics that we are talking about. And one of the main problems that we face in artificial intelligence today is the question of algorithm and what is being fed to the algorithm. What are the database that the artificial intelligence is being trained upon? So if you look at the problem from the perspective of Ekatmano Darshan, it would say that values first, the nation, culture should be the people's experience. The AI you are using should be based on your own culture, your data set, instead of just depending on the LLMs being created abroad in the Western countries. The algorithm must embody dharma, that is the transparency, fairness, privacy, and trust. When you come to the Virat, the national, basically the national body, so it will translate into the national capacity, that do you have the data centers, do you make the chips, do you have the semiconductor industry, do you have data localization? And when you come to the Vyakti, that is the individual cell of the Virat, it translates to greater awareness, greater sensitivity about the use of artificial intelligence. This small example I have given to tell you that Ekatmano Darshan can be translated to very simple prescriptions for the challenges the youth is facing today. There are many other things. If you talk about mental health, the mental health is a big issue now among the youth. The problem of burnout, the mental health crisis is growing by leaps and bounds. What is the problem? What is the diagnosis according to the integral humanism? It is because we have started living fragmented life. We are only, when we talk about the body, Sharir, Manas, Buddhi, and Atma, we have been focusing too much on Sharir and Manas and neglecting Buddhi and Atma, and that is leading to this kind of mental health crisis in the country. The solution has to be in ensuring holistic development for the youth, from purposeful interaction with the society to volunteer works to yoga and other things. So when we talk about the modern challenges, and I'm not going into much detail for this thing because there's a scarcity of time now, the Ekatmano Darshan can be refigured, reconfigured to analyze the challenges being faced by the youth and to provide the solution for going forward in the country. So when you're talking about the purpose, that is clear. The blueprint is also clear. Now the question is that what is the Shakti that we talk about of the youth? So when you say power, potential, and purpose. Of course, when we discuss about that the individuals are the cells of the Virata and the youngest cells are the youth, and they are the most dynamic, vibrant components of the Virat. So their physical wellness and intellectual vitality is absolutely necessary for the benefit of the nation, for the growth of the nation going forward. Because an integrated human must harmonize body, mind, intellect, and soul, and youth possesses the highest reserve of all the fours. The second component is the moral power that the youth have. There are many people sitting here who come from the student politics, and they will talk about, now many of them are Yuva Morcha, and they say when we were in the student politics, we would take very moral stand against the administration. Ye galat hai, ye sahi hai, and we will not bend. Nowadays also lots of people are famous on Instagram, but I'm talking about pre-Instagram day activism. So that moral dynamism, that moral power of the youth is one of the most important aspect of the Shakti of the youth in the country. And we have to make sure that the morality framework remains Indian. Because one of the problems that we have been seeing, that this morality framework is becoming more and more Western. You will see lots of students will go and protest waving the copy of the Constitution and say, liberty, liberty, azadi, azadi, and so on. The funny thing is that most of them would have never read the Constitution. Because if they had read the Constitution, they will realize that liberty is not the core of Indian Constitution, that is the core of American Constitution. Justice is the core of the Indian Constitution. So we have to make sure that the moral framework of the country, of the youth, remains Indian, and that is a very important aspect, because if we lose control over the superstructure of the moral framework, we will produce more and more works, unfortunately, that we're seeing today, even in the Indian universities. And the last point of the Shakti is the mobilization capacity or the Sangathan Shakti. Upadhyay ji talked many a times about the importance of the state, but he said that state is just one of the power centers in the society. And in Indian context, that is especially true. As I always say, if you compare India and China, which are one of the oldest surviving civilizations on the earth, if you look at the Chinese history, you will have 300 years of imperial rule, unified China, 100 years of anarchy. Then again 300, 400 years of rule of a unified imperial dynasty, like you can see CCP is now. And then you will again have civil wars and anarchy for 100 years. In India, it's the other way around. You will have 100 years of united India with the Mauryans or the Guptas or someone else, and the 300 years of fragmentation. This is a very important aspect. This is especially true in the terms of India's political economy. Because in the interplay between the centripetal and the centrifugal forces, somehow centrifugal forces in India have been more and more stronger. Now that has changed over the last 1 or 2 centuries. That's a different topic. But when you talk about this Sangathan Shakti, when you talk about the role of the state in the country, in India it is limited because in India the society is often more powerful than the state. In China, the state is more powerful than the society. So Upadhyay in his Panditji in his Ekatmano Darshan talks about the power of the youth, especially to mobilize and do social volunteer service, the national service, which is independent of the state power and which can ensure the survivability, the vitality of the society and civilization, even if the state disintegrates in the future. The Shakti of the youth, he talks about, and potential is limitless. You know, when you talk about the potential, I was just talking to, and just reading the tweets of many of our member of parliaments who have gone abroad on the delegations. And they say that, well, the first half of the delegation, wherever they are, is about Operation Sindoor, terrorism, and briefings and other things. They say immediately it becomes, we want to partner with India for economic development. We want to ensure stronger trade relations with India, how we can tap into the youth demographics of India. So potential of India as today is limitless because of our youth demographics, because of the vast opportunities of economic development and modernization, and also a huge potential to make sure that the youth come in large number in the politics and decision-making power centers. The Prime Minister Modi has already talked about, called upon more than 100,000 youths from non-political backgrounds to come into the politics, and that I see is the largest potential that we're looking at, because that has the potential to change, in fact, to end the feudalism in the politics as well. We have ended feudalism largely in our countryside. We have ended feudalism largely in the economy after the economic reforms. What is left still is the political landscape where this needs to be changed, and that has a huge potential going forward. Our youth provides that idealism, that Shakti, that intellectual power, that physical capacity to make sure that India's politics gets changed. India gets a political culture which is more attuned to the youthful aspirations and the aspirations to create a Viksit Bharat going forward. So I have mostly talked about, different concepts and ideas, and I must confess that I started reading about Ekatmano Darshan over the last 2 months only, and I have tried to put forward what I have understood about the Ekatmano Darshan and the role of the youth according to the Ekatmano Darshan. So basically, I just end my talk by saying a very simple thing that I'll just end my talk by saying that the purpose of the youth is to lift the last Indian, the Antyodaya, to guard the civilizational code and the territorial integrity, and sustain the planet, and for which they must follow the core prescription of the integral humanism, that is to make sure that your Shri, mind, Atma, and soul are in alignment with the national chitti and the national aspiration and the national swabhav. Thank you, everyone.